Alrighty, Skirk fan, time for a bit of a Skirk content. Now, it's a bit of a late video, but I've been, testing out Skirk for the past couple of days. Well, she did have a bit of stuff to actually test out. And as usual, we're going to be looking into some of her best team comps variation, even though we technically know that Skirk only works mostly in a freeze team. She does have a bit of a variation because, while we do have a couple of cryo and hydro character for you guys to work around with building a team for her, even if some of it isn't really the best case scenario for Skirk. Now, I won't be touching a lot on how to play Skirk specifically because I'm pretty sure you guys have already watched some of the other video, and we're only going to be focused mostly on a DPS Skirk team in this video. If there are enough interested, or if you guys are more focused on a burst kind of Skirk team build, maybe I'll make another video after I test more of a burst Skirk out, but most of us are actually onto a DPS Skirk at the current point. Skirk is going to be finally coming, and I know that many of you are excited for her. So if you're planning to swipe for pooling, then don't forget to check out Loot Bar. If you know me, I've been recommending you guys Loot Bar before, since you can always save almost a 25% on all of your top-ups. With over 100,000 orders and so many good reviews at this point. And by the way, this also applies to PS5 and Xbox user who can place orders through Loot Bar. You can be sure that Loot Bar is trustworthy. Here you can see my order receipts of all of my top-ups that I have done. And for those who are going for the highest package when topping up, there's also a limited discount options available once every version. So guys, be sure to check out Loot Bar through the link in my description, as it can be a great way for you to save your money, especially if you are topping up a large amount. And one thing about Skirk is that up until this point, even though her kit is, I wouldn't say it's really too bad. I think her power level is pretty decent, but she's a character that actually relies a lot on a character, and that is Escoffier. And while Escoffier has already been released basically 6 weeks ago, so if you haven't actually got Escoffier, Skirk still have access to a lot of other teams that you can build around her. But Escoffier is just such a pretty major upgrade towards Skirk that, technically speaking, if you are really invested into your Skirk, you would love to have an Escoffier on your team. So I'm pretty sure a team that's absolutely common, and I'm sure everyone has already known, is going to be Skirk, Escoffier, Furina, and Shanhua. Basically the most popular Skirk team out there, because while it is the most invested Skirk team that you can find, and overall performs really well and being on the top of the tier list of the team for Skirk. So this specific team, I don't think we have to touch a lot on that. However, there is a variation, because I know that many of you don't have access to Shanhua, and that is you can use Yelan in Shanhua's place, and this team can be as good, or if not, sometimes even better than the Shanhua team, depending on how much invested you've got on your Yelan. But the fact that Skirk is a character that can trigger Yelan's elemental burst and benefit off of her damage increase, Yelan is definitely an absolutely valuable character on a Skirk team. Other team options that you can look into, for example, if you don't have Furina on your account, then you can go with Skirk, Escoffier, a Shanhua, and a Kokomi if you do have access to these characters. Kokomi is still going to be a fine character. She's one of the few 5-star characters that can have access to off-field hydro application to help a bit of freezing, even though constant freezing on Skirk team isn't really a requirement. The Kokomi still have her value in terms of being the healer on this team, and of course having access to TTDS, which of course Skirk can use. Other than that, if you wanna, you can have a Mona on Shanhua's place. Mona is still pretty decently valuable in terms of having a bit of the attack boost for Skirk, even though her window is actually quite short. And of course she has a bit of off-field application and a bit of damage from her E skill, though it's always isn't really reliable from that front of Mona. But still, if we look into it, Mona can still have a bit of value. Another interesting option is going to be Skirk, Escoffier, Furina, and Sitlali. Surprisingly, Sitlali works really well on his Skirk team due to the sheer fact that, while first she is a cryo character, satisfies the fact that you can be on Skirk team, but other than that, she has access to a bit of shielding, a bit of off-field, even though it's not as good as Escoffier, but the more important thing is she has access to Cinder City set, which is quite nice of a buff for the Skirk team. So while if you're not using your Sitlali on the other team, because while Sitlali is a pretty popular character to be used in a melt team, but in this situation, if you have Sitlali to spare, then yes, she fits really well on the Skirk team. Now moving a bit more toward kind of a free-to-play teams, we can have a Skirk Escoffier, a Dahlia, and a Xingqiu. Now Dahlia is on the banner, so I'm pretty sure you guys should have access to a bit of him unless you are really unlucky. Obviously Dahlia is not a requirement to be on the Skirk team, but he does work because first of all, he is a Hydro character. He gives you a little bit of shielding, and more than that, he gives you a bit of attack speed increase, which Skirk benefits off as she uses her normal attack a lot, especially if you are using a DPS Skirk, then yes, Dahlia really helps. Xingqiu being here, obviously Xingqiu is just doing Xingqiu things, off-field damage, Hydro applications, and all those kind of things. Yeah, if we're looking into a Hydro 4-star character, Xingqiu is absolutely the best out there for you guys to be using at this point. Another character that you guys can technically consider is going to be Candice. The Candice is slightly in a weird situation, but funny enough, she can be on a Skirk team because while even though she doesn't have access to a lot of Hydro application, especially pre-C6, but you can still use the Candice pre-C6 on the Skirk team, for she has access to normal attack increase, and Skirk would love to have access to that. So yes, if you're looking to be a bit of a more free-to-play side, Candice is currently on the banner. If you pulled for her, you can use a bit on the Skirk team. Now, up until this point, we've mostly discussed Skirk team alongside with Escoffier, and as I mentioned, there would be some of you who actually don't have access to Escoffier, but you did pull for Skirk. So while in the waiting for Escoffier, which kind of team do we usually have access to? So first off, there's going to be a team such as Skirk, Yelan, Shenhe, and Farina. Now this team is more or less going to be a full-on power because you don't really have access to much of a healing on this specific team. You want to try to take out your enemies as fast as possible, but honestly, sometimes that can be a bit hard, so if you want a bit of healing, then you can swap Kokomi in place of Yelan so that she gives you pretty constant healing to sustain your team. Another option you can have is like a Skirk, Kokomi, Farina, and a Sitlali, right? A pretty decent options for you guys to mix and match, but again, these teams are really focusing on the 5-star character, so yes, they are technically pretty expensive. Now, whenever we touch on a slightly more free-to-play kind of team, you can look into kind of like a Skirk, Farina, Yelan, and interestingly a Mika onto a Skirk team. Now Mika is an interesting character, even though he focuses mostly on buffing physical damage, but other than that, he is a cryo character that have access to whole team healing, which is really nice for this specific Skirk team. But more than that, he has access to attack speed increase, which again, yes, benefits Skirk as well, which is why I'm putting Mika here in this team so that you guys can consider him if you do have access to Mika on your account. Another basically very free-to-play team is going to be a Skirk, Dahlia, Xingqiu, and a Charlotte. Yes, Charlotte can be considered because first of all, she's a cryo character, but other than that, she heals your team, which is great, and she is a catalyst character that have access to TTDS, and therefore Skirk can make use of Charlotte pretty decently. And well, those have been basically many of the team comps that focuses a lot on the freeze team to make the most out of Skirk's passive. But while Skirk can technically still be used on some of the other team comp as well, with just that you're losing out on the last passive of Skirk attack boost. But then at that point, you can mix and match a bit of some other team, and an interesting team that you guys can consider is going to be a Skirk, Dahlia, Mika, and Junjin team, an absolutely free-to-play team. And obviously, if you guys already consider any other team comp options other than freeze, then yeah, I'm pretty sure your account is more or less lacking character. However, if you do have these 3 characters, you can make an interesting team for Skirk because all of these 3 characters actually boost your normal attack speed, which is something that Skirk can make use of. But more than that, Junjin is a character that actually buff your normal attack, which of course does help Skirk as well. Obviously, by far the best team for Skirk out there. But while if we are already touching on a free-to-play teams options, then yes, this is one of the team comps that you can play around with. Now, a more serious team that that we can take into consideration if you lack in, Escoffier, you're lacking Sitlali or Shanhua, then a Skirk, Frina, Yelan, and a Shilonen can be considered. Obviously not going to be as good because yes, you are missing out on quite a bit of a buff for Skirk, but then again, since Shilonen does have the ability to buff many of the characters out there, including the specific Skirk team, if you're lacking any of the other options, then this specific option is still going to do you very decently until, Escoffier actually comes back, or you have another character that is very good for your specific Skirk team. So those are some of the team comps I've been testing out for the past couple of days, and I find they are pretty decent. I know that there are many other Skirk team out there that you guys have been playing around with, so if you do have any of them, leave it down in the comment sections and I would love to discuss with you guys there. Now, if you're trying to pull for the character in patch 5.7, especially for Skirk, and you're thinking about swiping, don't forget to check out loot bars. I'm sure they will be very helpful. Again guys, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe to not miss out on my future Genshin videos. With that, I wish you a super day and I'll catch you on my next video.